Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Lakewood City Council. I'll say it again. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Lakewood City Council study session for this Monday, January 23rd, 2023. We have 4 items for discussion tonight. The first is our Western State Hospital Master Plan update. I believe we have Mr. Buer who will lead us through this tonight, along with our Development Services Manager, Jessica Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This is actually going to be 3 presentations. Really, I'm going to start off with sort of a history. Then Jessica Olson, our Development Services Manager, is actually going to talk about some of the master plan conditions, as well as the permitting process and some of our current challenges. And lastly, we anticipate that the council may have some transportation questions as it relates to the plan. So we've asked Paul Busich to be present to answer any questions the council may have in that specific area. I'll start off with just some general comments. This master plan has been in the process for 20 years. It requires a consistent amount of persistence and patience. I will also tell you that we are here today where the city of Lakewood was able to have some level of regulatory authority by making some very important code changes that, 1, limited the size of expansions until a master plan was approved, and 2, the city of Lakewood obtained or required as a part of its code lead agency authority over SEPA. Now that is aggressive on the part of the city's perspective. DSHS did not object at the time that we did this. And later when we got into the master plan, they didn't like it, but it was a little bit too late to do anything about it. And so we continue to use the SEPA process to help us regulate certain issues. I will also state that it's very difficult to regulate essential public facilities. And so we are always in the process of trying to identify impacts and then mitigating for those impacts. We also found out through the permitting process that DSHS is unfamiliar with the GMA requirements. And if you're going to make an expansion or a major expansion to essential public facility, you have to take a look at it from a regional perspective. And that was difficult for them because it was not something that they were used to. And the city was in a process of continuing to declare their applications incomplete until they answered the questions satisfactory to the city that, why are you telling us this is the only place in Washington State that you can expand this type of facility over the many objections of the surrounding property owners? Finally, they were able to say something that got us to the point of a hearing examiner hearing. There were some difficult public hearings with lots of testimony from outside the Lakewood area over some of DSHS's policies and programs. This is also tied to the TruePled decision, which complicated even further the entire aspect of the master plan, but we were able to work around that. The other piece to this is that the city requires an annual review of their permit. That gives us the opportunity to talk about a variety of different issues, dealing with a whole bunch of different subjects specific to the master plan, which potentially allows the city of Lakewood to open that master plan for amendments if necessary. The master plan, I think, does do a couple of things. It keeps the hospital away from the residential neighborhoods to the north. The other thing that the council did was change the zoning to protect the open space area from expansion, because at one time Western State Hospital was exploring the opportunity of placing new facilities where generally the golf course is currently located, or the old golf course was located, and potentially abandoning some of the other buildings. And that was something that was not acceptable to the city. So we kind of tried to keep them centered on their current campus as much as possible. It's been a long process. It's been difficult. There's been a moratorium. There were lawsuits, extensive negotiations over our current code. And then they didn't like it, but they continued to abide by it. And then there were other opportunities where Western State came in and said, we'd like to open it up for prison-related functions twice. And the city politely said no. So I think that we've done a credible job in trying to manage a large facility, one of a very unique nature found on the West Coast. This is a very significant facility. The next one of similar size is found in Oregon. There's one in Atascadero, California. So those are three that come to mind, but this has been around the longest. With that, I'm going to turn the discussion over to Jessica to talk about permitting, and she does have a slide presentation to review with the council.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Mayor, council members, for having me here. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background. So where the master plan came from, the state decided to transition from what it was called before civilian to more forensic patients. So those different types of patients getting into the master plan, we're doing a 10-year here. So it's what's in the master plan should be developed within the next 10 years. That was kind of the commitment that was made through DSHS. And this is an update to the 1999 master plan. Sorry, this is a little bit small, but how the master plan came to be. So as Dave mentioned, 2019, DSHS approached the city and just started having conversations about this. It wasn't until 2020 that we actually had maybe something in hand. And then the project officially more so kicked off in 2022 when they finally submitted everything that we needed to update the master plan. We got a complete application in early 2022. Through that, as Dave mentioned, lots of meetings, environmental review. The city actually was lead agency on SEPA, which doesn't always happen in a case like this. Had public hearings. The hearing examiner made a decision in August that DSHS came back and did a request for reconsideration, very minor. In looking at it, they were asking for more beds for transitioning some of the patients. The city came back and asked, can we just make it persons instead of beds, in hopes that we would limit the amount of beds to the amount of beds that are there today. So we were successful in that. And the hearing examiner approved that request based on what the city requested from, in turn of DSHS's initial request. In December of this year, the appeal period closed. So now the master plan is in place and they're starting to implement it, even though they were trying to implement it a little bit before that happened. But we waited until December to start processing permits that were coming in. So it's in the master plan exactly. Planning context, David talked a little bit about that regional level. So we did make them explore their different state, regional, local laws that they have to live under. And part of it is, you are a central public facility, but there's other things that come along with that. The guiding principles really focus more so on that refocus on forensic patients over civil commitments. And then the facilities development portion of the master plan is really the crux of what buildings and facilities are going to be developed. And then everything else kind of comes along with that, because when you have facilities being developed, you're going to need access, circulation, transportation. Big part of this is preserving the open space. We mentioned in the memo, there's rezones that occurred within the last few years to make sure that very limited development can happen in those open space zones. Site security was another issue, keeping everything kind of more closely together with security fencing and things like that, so that there's not any issues in the surrounding neighborhoods and on the campus itself. And then utilities and infrastructure, so that we have a long-term, service needs for a lot of the different things like water, sewer, electrical, things like that. And then the appendices, actually, there's even more supplemental information that comes with the master plan related to transportation impacts. The ones in the plan particularly are related to the operations. We're also looking at doing some, or at least requesting some analysis related to the construction impacts as well, because there's two different things going on there. There's also the environmental documentation within the appendices of that. So it's a big document, even though the master plan it's detailed, and then there's even more detail underneath it. So I'm going to focus now, kind of get more specific into the facilities portion of it. So the biggest part, you look on the map, sorry, is on the kind of the west side of campus, Silicon Boulevard there on the bottom. That site that's marked with A, that's the new forensic hospital, and that's a 350 bed facility. It's quite large. I believe there's also going to be an administrative building there as well. There's a number of buildings that are already there that would be demolished. In turn of that, some of those are moving or expanding on the other side of the campus. There's also the residential cottage, that's the opposite side with it marked as a B. And that's for the Child Study and Treatment Center. The one in the middle is marked as a C is still to be determined. We asked for a parallel study to see if there is actually a need for regionally for that particular place to be located in Lakewood, if they can prove that there's not another site that makes better sense or is more in need somewhere else in the region. So we did request that. The court case that Dave had mentioned plays into that a little bit as well, because they need to cite some of those people, but we're asking them to be a little more equitable across the region when citing.
So just before we leave that, so all the old brick historic buildings, those are coming down for the most part?
If I think I have it, I have it in a couple other slides that'll show some of the ones that are being demolished. Most of them are. There's one that's being retained. It's one of the larger buildings.
Okay.
And we'll get in a little more detail in a couple of slides. So just functionality, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide, but under community development, we've got a number of people working on this that are going to be intaking and reviewing these applications. We have a few functions coming through the permit counter there. That will be their first place. Our staff is already primed and ready to know that these are coming and to how they need to be processing them so we can do it in a timely manner. And the next step is really checking that everything is consistent with the master plan. So the planners have been looking back every time we get a permit in and making sure that they're doing it in line with the master plan. We've already had one. We had to ask for a director determination because it didn't quite fit within the original master plan. So looking at consistency there, I have SEPA on here, but we've already done SEPA for the overall project. So realistically, if they come in with something that's going to trigger beyond that SEPA document, we would potentially have to do more review. After we get through more of the planning stages, looking at design review and things like that, we go into site development. So they're looking at moving things on the earth, and then the building permits and things like that. In between that is kind of the demo phase. But we are also trying to work hand in hand with Public Works Engineering. Been in a few meetings with them, so we can kind of hear what's going on the other side with all the construction movement and traffic and the things that they're working on as well. So we're coordinating and making sure everybody internally is apprised of what's going on. So here's what I was talking about, a little bit more detail. So I forget the number, I think it's 28 or 27. That building that's kind of like a X shape is remaining. And then all the buildings essentially in white on the top are remaining as well. The ones in orange are the ones to be removed and replaced by the forensic building. So this is where I had to have notes for myself. So phase one, and this is in talking with at least one of their architecture firms to kind of get an idea of how this is going to go. initially they have to do the relocation process and site preparation. So you have to be moving people from the existing buildings that are going to be demolished. It sounds like the buildings in the middle are going to be demolished first, and then the one on the the right hand, so east side, and then the one, there's a building 10 up on the kind of like west corner. That one will be demolished at the very end after everything's built. So there's going to be kind of 3 phases of demo. Before that happens, they need to expand some of the buildings on the opposite side of on the east side of campus. So they're going to do a couple, there's a tenant improvement, there's an addition, and then there's some modular buildings that they're asking for to be able to relocate people during construction. And so that would need to be done first. They're also adding in the security fence right at the get-go, because they need to be able to remove the other security fence. So we already have some permit applications for a little bit of this work. We're already noticing there's a lot of different players in this. So there's a lot of different architecture firms and contractors that are being worked with. DSHS has a number of project managers as well that are just on their side trying to manage these projects. So it's been difficult. And we've asked, to try and consolidate that a little bit more, give us a big picture, give us timeframes and who we need to be on point with, and to always have someone from DSHS in the room while we're doing these things, because they haven't always been present. And so that's already a request from the get-go from the city. Phase 2, again, would be that demolition as they're unearthing things, getting ready for site development and making sure that the ground is in the right place. From there, where they would go into foundation and building permits. They're talking about bringing in a few cranes and things like that as well. So it's a big undertaking. And this is just the forensic hospital that you're seeing here. There's a number of smaller projects that are going on the other sides of, on the other side of the campus. The map that I have here is from the master plan, and this is more their circulation element for ultimately what it's going to operate as. Public Works Engineering has been in, like I mentioned, in consultation with them about what they're going to do intersection wise. So as much as I've heard in some of those meetings, they would use Chapel Gate as the main construction entrance. They're still talking about what to do. There would be an intersect or a signal there. They're also going to have the signal at Circle Drive. That's going to be the main staff entrance during construction. And then there is potential to eventually move that as a signal to Chapel Gate. But then none of that is truly determined yet. Do you have any other notes on that one? And again, Paula is here for questions if you need them. And it said they would fund all costs for the temporary and the permanent installations.
So the main entrance, that can be a lighted intersection there, one of them, or both?
Both of the intersections that are circled will both have lights at them. How they operate the Chapel Gate, we've still been talking about that. Like if you could turn left or not, things like that are still being worked out.
This needs to be resolved before we get too far into construction.
Yeah.
Project management, big issue with the hospital. Once the property owner to take responsibility, staff does not like being in a meeting with the contractor and the architect. No one can do this.
Right.
It's very awkward.
Because right now we have one lighted intersection. So having 2 on Stilica Boulevard is going to be fun.
Don't forget Sentinel as well.
Yeah, right. Mr. Anderson.
So what allowances are made regarding the CD&L, the waste from the demolition? It's going to be a large amount of inert material. I hope it's all being trucked off site, and then the problem arises that we've improved and are improving Stilica Boulevard, and we have all sorts of unexpected truck traffic to shorten its life. How is that being addressed?
Mr. Anderson, I'm going to defer to Paul Pusich on that.
Good evening. So you had a couple of questions I heard. I wanted to respond to a couple of things. First off, as far as the truck traffic goes, all the loads coming out of the construction zone will be within the acceptable weight limits. I don't expect them to cause any grief to our road. If there is any damages that occur, they'll be required to repair those as the project progresses. I want to clarify one thing. We are right now in discussions with the contractor and the representative for Western State Hospital on Chapel Gate. So they initially came to us about using that as a temporary construction access unhindered. And the answer was no. You're not going to be allowed to do that because you will totally mess up traffic on Steilacoom Boulevard. You will be required to put in a temporary signal there. Long term, the goal is, and their plan is, to turn that from a temporary signal into a permanent signal. So we had a lot of conversations about the timing of when to do that and how to do that. We offered up to them that under contract to the city, we would do the design for the temporary signal as well as the design for the permanent signal. The premise being is that they're going to cover all the costs and we're going to end up with the signal anyhow. So we would do it per our standards. There's also a cost savings to them because we have spare controllers that we can install at this time under the temporary condition. And then they would be able to just move into the permanent condition. So there's an advantage on both sides. The spare controller would be replaced at cost by them when we needed to move the permanent infrastructure at Circle Drive over to Chapel Gate. The timing for that is they need to have a temporary signal in place by mid this summer. And then the permanent signal transference would occur in about 4 years' time. So the agreement with them just in the formative stage right now would be they're covering all of our time, our staff time, overhead, administration, and all materials, everything to go through bidding to put in a temporary signal, and then to cover all the costs for the city to move the signal that currently sits at Circle Drive over to Chapel. The long-term plan for Circle Drive is that will be a right in, right out only. There will be no conflicting traffic movements across there. Therefore, there's no need at that point to have a signal there. So it's efficiencies on both sides. We had a long conversation with them about using Sentinel Drive, which also is the primary and the only access point for the high school. That quote road is actually on their property, but they had already had conversations with the school district and the high school about having a desire not to have conflicting traffic from construction materials, construction activity, and then students who may be relatively newer drivers coming in and out of the high school and coming out through that at different times throughout the day.
Back to my initial question, is CD&L waste all being hauled off-site?
That's not something I know of.
What kind of waste?
What?
What kind of waste just over?
Construction, demolition, lumber. When you knock the buildings down, all the stuff that's there, where's it going to go?
If there's anything coming off the site, it's intended to come out through Chapel Gate. And then it will, depending upon their disposal points, it could be go through Steilacoom or it could be coming down Steilacoom Boulevard.
So as part of, my question really is, as part of the plan, are they hauling it all off or they intend to dispose of it on site, which may result in some environmental issues?
I'm afraid that I've never been privy to that conversation. I don't know what they're doing with the material.
Because there's going to be an awful lot of it. And that was my concern with the road, even though if it's under weight limit, the amount of traffic stressing the road will be of a much higher magnitude than we currently have. We don't have trains of dump trucks running down Steilacoom Boulevard day after day after day.
Mr. Anderson, I don't have the answer to your question specifically this evening. I do know that we would make that a condition of the site development permit. Oftentimes they do recycle some of the concrete on site, but I can't tell you the amount this evening, and that's something that we will get back with the council.
The other issue there would be, I think, tribal issues with respect to archaeology. If you're excavating to dispose, it would create a whole nother set of issues, so. But you save a lot of money if you don't run those trucks, so.
I will tell you that it is likely we will require them to do a TV and video inspection of the road surface prior to starting construction. And at the end of construction, we did the same thing with the contractor working for the State Department of Transportation on Union Avenue. When that became their primary haul route and they wanted to use that, we made them drive up and down it, take the video, take individual stills, and then we went through the end with them and inspected it to see if there's any damage to the roadway, and they were on the hook for doing those repairs.
We did not mention the historic properties on the site. That is separate from the master plan. That is something that the city intends to address with Western State Hospital in future legislative years. But they asked us to keep that out of the site, out of the master plan at this time because it was making things a little too complicated for them.
So there's no discussion of a dedication of those areas or open space like we do in other developments as a condition of the site plan?
Not right now.
But it could be.
It could be.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To follow on about the discussion about the buildings that are going to be demolished. Given the age and the generations during which they were built, what sort of risks are there in terms of tearing them down? We typically worry about buildings a certain age having lead paint, certain ones having asbestos. Some of these are even older than that, and particularly given the prevailing winds that will tend to blow things towards Oak Brook. What are we, envisioning, or what do we have in the city code that'll provide us some assurance that when those demolition permits are issued, that there is some containment of demolition hazards?
I believe you're going to find that specific information in the building code relative to the demolition permit. So that's where that's going to be found. I do not have the details this evening. I can research that and bring it back.
Okay. And when buildings are going to be demolished, is on this one here. What does that area look like after that? Are the demolished building footprints being turned into parking? And then there's some things about demolished parking. Are they being paid into green space? What's the end state after demolition?
So from what we've seen from the architectural drawings, so they're in preliminary stages of knowing what the building's going to look like. It might not be exactly as the footprint that's on the master plan. So there will be a large forensic hospital. So that'll be the bulk of what's in the middle portion there. There will be an administrative building looking like it's going to be more on the Silicon Boulevard side, where a lot of their staff's going to be housed. A couple parking lots on either side, some open space and things inside of potentially the security fence so that they can walk around and have landscaping and things like that. So there's a mixture, and it's not quite as square and prominent as it shows on the picture on the bottom on the slide 7. But it would take up the majority of that space. It's more centered from what we were seeing. And it's not so just heavy on impervious as it might look in the picture on slide 7.
Yeah. That
If I can expand on that a little bit, when you're looking at a demolition permit, all the current utilities will have to be capped. Foundation, the building itself demolished, the foundations will be removed. Some of those buildings may have basements. The basements will have to come out, the dirt will have to be compacted. In that process, you may find some tribal related archaeological issues, in which case everything comes to a halt. And then the Nisqually tribe comes out and takes a look and gives it a green light before you go any further. Other issues go back to the demolition permit and dust control, things of that nature. So it all comes out and then is replaced with a new building. The other issue out here is they have significant utility issues with power, sewer, and water. And not all has to be brought up to code prior to us finalizing the project itself or even issuing the permit. There have been issues in the past with not having sufficient power or any expansions, which has limited their ability to make expansions. So there's a major upgrade to the utility transformer through Tacoma Power as a part of this project. That's with Tacoma Power, but there's a lot of things that need to be dealt with on this. So it gives you an idea of the fact that it all comes out and gets replaced.
So on utilities, electrical is primarily Tacoma Power or their own backup systems that would be into the site. But for water, is there a mix of water providers onto the site?
So they have their own water utility on site as well as, the sewer does go into Chamber. Or is it
It
their
goes
own?
to, I believe it goes to Stilicho.
Oh, yes, the sewer goes to Silicon, water is on site. They have they're essentially their own water purveyor.
My understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that they were contemplating having the water district take over the water system. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
been decided.
They might need to look into it based on the water needs of the new facilities.
Okay, and how does the master plan envision in 10 years its relationship to Fort Silicon Park? Is the master plan addressed that relationship at all?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Right now, we've kept the two separate.
So when we looked at the environmental impact of what the changes were, considering the impacts on the park, were not something we looked at, or were something we thought there wasn't anything consequential?
The only thing of consequence that I can recall is the underground pedestrian tunnel. Now, there has been terms or conditions where patients have been allowed to use the tunnel and meander throughout Fort Steilacoom Park. Unsupervised, that's caused some problems in the past. There's ongoing debate of who owns the tunnel. You know, it's my position that the city of Lakewood owns the tunnel. And that's something that we either need to close or enhance in some way or fashion. That remains an open-ended question that we are looking at through the transportation process.
So when we were able to finally complete the SEPA checklist and work through the SEPA process, and we came to a mitigated determination of non-significance, what mitigations did we and DSHS agree to in order to not do any IS?
I'd have to go back and review the terms and conditions of the master plan approval, Mr. Branstetter. I'm not going to try to give an off-the-cuff answer here this evening.
Okay. And then there was a comment in your memorandum about that there would be an annual review. And I was kind of wondering whether that is going to mean there are ongoing reviews, or is there going to be some sort of formal annual review on a specific date that will be prepared for the public and for our and DSHS's benefit?
There is an annual review. It is a formal process. We have not set the date because we haven't gotten that far into the project yet.
So Do you envision that being primarily a staff function, or will it involve the planning commission or the council or others?
My recollections, that would be a staff position. We would do an administrative review to see how it was in compliance with the master plan. If it was not in compliance with the master plan, then we could go back and take a look at it. Or if new conditions came up where we need to open up the master plan, that would give us that opportunity.
That's all that I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
We just touched on it a little. It's my recollection that they had their own water system and that some of that crossed through the park. They have the water tower back up. Two water towers. First question is does any of our water in the park interface with their water system?
Not to my knowledge.
And I guess that would probably negate the possibility of integrating that in some way.
One of the concerns that we have had that Mr. Abusich has expressed to us is that the current towers and tanks may not meet current earthquake requirements. And so it's something that we're going to be talking to them about. And in some ways, it would make better sense that they change their water system, but we don't own the water system. So it makes it kind of uncomfortable for us to talk about the water system, all other than does it meet the basic public needs of that facility. This has been an ongoing struggle oftentimes with this project.
And a more basic question, do they have the water pressure to run fire hoses during demolition?
I don't know it. We'll find out.
Which is pretty standard
Right.
procedure for dust control. So.
But I do also know at certain times, the fire district has 24/7 fire watch on the property.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, I want to elaborate a little bit more on the water system out there. So absolutely, there is a well on the park and two tanks that portion of Western State Hospital uses for the water supply. They also have additional wells on the site that they also use to feed portions of their property. There's also an emergency intertie tied in with Lakewood Water District. And if you recall a few years ago that we put a new water line right through the park that goes out to Tillicum Boulevard from Angle Lane. And the intention on that was for Lakewood Water District to work with Western State Hospital to shift to that as their primary water supply. So in my conversations, I feel like they have that well in hand. They will have sufficient water pressure to do what needs to be done, and they will more than likely, even though they haven't committed to it yet, they're still bouncing back and forth. Indications are that they want to get rid of all the well systems that they have and go on to Lakewood Water District, because it's much easier to buy water from Lakewood Water District than run your own water utility and comply with all the requirements. So that's the current stance that I understand it.
So what rights do we have with respect to the water in the event that they abandon their usage? I know about it as much about that as I know about securities law. The red flag goes up when you talk about water rights and timing and use and abandonment. And
if I may, this has been a point of conversation with the Lakewood Water District as well as DSHS for a few years, the whole time that I've been here, 4.5 years. It's complicated, as you've already indicated, because we are not a water utility and Lakewood Water District is a water utility. The well is located on the park, which is the city's. One of the towers is in the park. The other tower is in Pierce College. So they own the upper tower, or will, when all said and done, if it is abandoned by DSHS. So it's no straightforward answer. I think we would like to get the revenue. We've had very, very preliminary conversations with the general manager of Lakewood Water District to see if there's a way that they could manage the water supply and we would get revenue out of it. But without us being a water district unto ourselves, it's going to be challenging to do anything else other than that, or to use the water to supplement the irrigation around the park for all the ball fields and kind of wean ourselves off of the monthly charges to the Lakewood Water District.
Before they get too far along down this path, I'd hope we can get an opinion as to the ownership of the water rights and the rights to transfer and what to do to retain it. For example, I know I'm thinking of an instance with a lake and another instance with a river, another instance with a well, where the key was to keep the valve open and flush it every once in a while. So you were actually using some of the water. You didn't have to use it all, but the asset itself is very valuable. And it's something that the Lakewood Water District, for example, they purchased in the Abitibi sites water rights to replace other wells. And they're very valuable. If we received some type of right, and pun intended, or a springing right, that at some point we have the ability to cash in on that, I think we should try to make sure we preserve it.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of questions. Number of employees, is that, what's the count there? Are there limitations? Do we expect more or less employees than we currently have? And then when you walk out there now, during the busiest portions of the day, people are kind of parked all over the place. Have they addressed their parking situation on site?
Not beyond what's in the master plan. So they do have some level of identification of number of parking spaces and where it would be in the master plan in general. Since the number of beds are remaining the same, I don't know that the number of staff would necessarily increase. Potentially, we can get a confirmation from DSHS. There's nothing noted that I've seen that says it would increase in any way, but I can correct myself later if need be. Then the parking would be distributed evenly based on how many beds and people are, once the facility is actually finished, where the different staff would be in correlation to the different buildings.
So, go ahead.
If I can add to that, we'll definitely seek confirmation on the employee count, but my recollection is it's pretty much like for like. One of the other things is there was a significant amount of discussion with them and me on provision for adequate parking. So we'll make sure that spaces meet the number of employees, et cetera. So we can come back and provide that information.
Okay. And then, when you talk about the Child Study and Treatment Center, that's in addition to the one that was just completed. So they're planning to do another one. Is that imminent?
No.
And then the civil, and I want to understand the civil commit, or what you call the community, because right now they're trying to cite two of these places, and one in Clark County that there's been opposition to. I'm gathering that maybe it's under construction now. And then there's one in Snohomish County. Snohomish County never wants anything. So it's closer to Stanwood. So the whole thing was built on this, right? That there'll be these communities, civil commit places. That's the governor's plan, yet none have been completed yet. So now let me play devil's advocate. I'm a Lakewood resident. I'm going to say, why do I feel like we're going to get the civil commit before Snohomish County gets it, or before Clark County gets it?
Can we go back to one of the drawings? Yeah. It's C. And it's referred to as the Community Residential Treatment Facility. It's 48 beds, contingent on a completion of a parallel study to site community facilities in the region. We're not approving that until they complete their study And we've had the opportunity to take a look at it to make sure the city of Lakewood is not taking on more than our fair share. This also goes back a little bit to the Department of Commerce that was supposed to be giving to the legislature a report on a lot of this related material, and it's not been ready yet. This was something that was scheduled for this session. So this is a bit of a bone of contention with city staff that, okay, we will place a location for your residential treatment facility, RTF, but that doesn't mean it's approved.
So it is contingent. They can't just whip out the master plan and say we're in for our building permits.
Well, they might, but the answer is we're not approving your building permits. And if you really want to get nasty about it, we're back to the city's hearing examiner.
Okay.
The other issue is that the new forensic hospital, that's getting built. But to the left, Western State wants to add a new forensic hospital and add more beds. But as a part of this underlying lawsuit, the judges intervene and says, no, let's keep the existing facilities now. The X building. And the reason is there's a desire to provide for a level of care that was not existing, and DSHS made an expensive addition and upgraded that facility for that purpose. The judge's position is, why did you do this now that you're talking about tearing it down and building a new building? And so right now, that is sort of an open-ended question. There's another issue with the level of service that's currently being provided. Is it sufficient? Are patients coming in and leaving appropriately timely so that we can open up more beds? So that's another issue that's really with the courts of DSHS. This thing is difficult. I mean, oftentimes we're dealing with Department of Revenue, the Attorney General's office, DSHS, and trying to find out what direction are they going in resolving mental health related issues in the state.
So now, okay, so we'll leave it at that because I don't know what's in the X. I thought there were 16 bed facilities in there. One was an evaluation treatment center, and
they changed it. It was
changed
a variety of different things. Right now, it's apparently, my understanding, it's a forensic facility.
okay. So help us understand how, when we talk forensic, we're talking people who are there for an evaluation. It's my understanding, an evaluation because they've been involved or charged criminally with something, and are sent here from anywhere from Whatcom County to Clark County and every place in between here to get their evaluation over a certain time period. I've been in the forensic facility, in back, and there seems to be a decent level of security, but I don't know, right? So when you say security and security fencing, the way they treat the civil side is it's a hospital. DSHS probably, if they were here tonight, would probably tell us, well, the forensic is still a hospital. So how do we let our neighbors know that the security levels are adequate for the forensic hospital?
The forensic hospital, the way it's designed and built, is all interior. Once you get into a forensic hospital, there are no externalities. You are in basically a rectangular building with a courtroom in the center. So all of the activities within the building are in that courtroom. You do not go out from that facility, you stay in the building, and it reminds you a bit of some of the prison installations or institutions that you see where they try to encapsulate or enclose everybody within an area. It's probably not the best explanation. So, Mr. Mayor, this is what I heard. More information on the demolition or the demolition permit process. I think it's really tied to the building permit and site development permit. It also has relationships with dust control and other related construction activities. Council member Anderson requested an opinion on water rights and water transfers. There was also a question about confirmation on employee count and parking count, so we'll come back and verify that. I think those are the takeaways that I heard. If I missed something, please let me know.
I think I heard some sort of confirmation on site development criteria for resurrecting the road if damaged.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that, and then, you know, the dangling, I don't say dangling participle, but the dangling issue is the officer quarters. And how the officer quarters over there and whether that can be a dedication required as a condition of development. I know that probably should have been or would have been in the master plan, but it still is something that's subject to further review, I'm sure. We haven't finalized negotiations with that yet, I know.
We've attempted to address that issue on several occasions. Their response is they're not ready yet.
Mhm.
I believe Mr. Caulfield may have something to say. I'll turn it back to him.
What's keeping them from being ready?
I think they're just overwhelmed with the level of construction activity.
Got it, okay. Mr. Anderson.
Is that even addressed at the first level by DSHS? I know when I was personally involved in negotiations regarding the termination of the lease between the county and the state for the golf course back there. And it was with General Services. It wasn't with DSHS. They took care of the real estate. So General Services might have more to say about releasing the historic area from ownership than DSHS.
Anything else? Anyone? Mr. Buer? Well, thank you for the overview. I know it's a huge project and it would be interesting to know when we go down for our legislative days, whether there's a message we can deliver to our legislators about keeping an eye on coordination and perhaps streamlining that for you, if we can do that. Might be a good thing. I'm looking at Mr. Caulfield, so.
Enterprise Services.
Yeah. Department of Enterprise Services, yeah, great. Thank you very much for all your work on that. Long-standing project. More to follow, I'm sure. When do you foresee any ground broken? Is this spring 2023?
They would like to get going as soon as possible. But we're struggling to make sure that permit A is sequenced with permit B and C, and it's creating confusion because permit D is coming in before we have permit A.
Right.
So this whole issue of project management becomes a significant one. And we don't want to get ahead of ourselves as Jessica mentioned, there's been a desire to have the city review permits in advance of the Western State Hospital approval. We said no, they've been respectful of that. We are trying to do some things by tracking permits by building in a map so that we can follow this. This is a $500 million project over 5 years.
Yeah.
And so just keeping track of all this, and that's just not us. West Pierce Fire District also has a large role to play in this as well. So it's challenging.
Is there any cultural significance or requirements on the stone wall with regard to its retention and salvage, its maintenance, anything like that? That people have asked because it seems
Yeah.
like there are folks taking sledgehammers to sections of it, right? And it's just looking not good.
I think Paul has a better answer than I have.
That in cars, I've seen a car go through apparently.
Based on our interactions with DAP as well as with DSHS, basically the wall can come down as long as it is documented. And originally, we didn't want to touch it.
Right.
Working with them, I think that they have worked a way to be able to put the sidewalk in without tearing down a lot of the wall. Where in the past where we had suggested a similar solution before all this came to a head, and they had indicated they were not interested in granting us an easement across the property, but now I think they will. So ultimately, I think we would be safe in saying that some of that wall will be coming out.
Hmm.
How much they will be able to retain is yet to be determined.
Okay. One would think it would have some historical significance, but potentially not, right? Mr. Caulfield?
Anything related to the wall and the decision-making will not be the cities, it will be DSHS's.
So we can't control whether they take it down or not, is what you're telling
We don't want to control it, it's their wall. And it does have significance, so we're going to let them determine whether or not it's worth taking it down.
me. So if they say it's worth taking down and it has no significance, we have to.
That's their call. We're not going to tell them. We're providing them options and alternatives regarding how to work around the wall. But again, if they want to take down the wall, that's their prerogative.
Okay. I'm sure they do.
We see it as historic, but there's probably mental health advocates that see it as something darker. And they're probably in DSHS and they wouldn't necessarily agree with us, is what I'm thinking. As amazing as it, because I kind of find it amazing that they wouldn't find it historical, they wouldn't want to keep it.
Right.
Because it really is symbolic.
Historical and symbolic, yeah, right.
But I have this feeling that there are probably people inside the mental health community that see it differently. Just a
Okay.
guess.
Very good. Well, a large topic for further conversation, no doubt. Thank you again. So next, we're going to review the amendment to the interlocal agreement with Pierce College to build the baseball field at Fort Silicon Park, and Ms. Dodsworth will give us an overview on this. I think we have some Pierce College friends in the audience that might help us out with some questions.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. We're excited to give you an update tonight on the project at Fort Silicon Park regarding the infield changes as well as the Pierce College home field project. So I have with me Stacy Redding. She's our capital projects coordinator, and she is the lead in keeping all of these moving parts together. And as you said, we do have staff from Pierce College who will be here if you have anything specific regarding the ILA or their contribution or anything like that, but we'll get started. The packet starts on page 17, I believe, but just as a real quick history, you know, we've been working on this with Pierce College, with council and Pierce College for the last 2 years, and it seems like time's flown by quite quickly, but we started in, the city started by getting grants, 2 different grant sources to improve putting turf in fields at the 4 fields at Fort Silicon Park. When we were announcing that, because we were excited about the project as well as the revenue that we were bringing to the project, Pierce College contacted us and said, hey, we have been looking for a home field since the 70s, since we left. And so they wanted to work with us on that. We came forward to council in January of 2021 and said, hey, is this a good idea? Should we move forward? Council gave us permission to move forward. We started working on this project. We then came in a bit later in October of 2021 and provided some information on the design costs and did an ILA that would talk about how much each entity would be contributing. We would be putting in 1.6 million. They were initially putting in 1.6 million to do the project. And then we were able to hire a consultant to help us move this project forward. During that time in the spring of 2022, we started looking at location and design and elements. And just from the very beginning, the project was laid out with what a home field would look like, what elements would be included, and then of course the turf infields on the other fields. So we started working on the site, and in spring we decided, or we came forward with council with some additional information, because what we originally hoped would be a $3.2 million project was growing because of the true cost for some of those elements that we hadn't originally anticipated. The city's contribution and the city's elements have remained the same throughout this whole project. So it was really focused a lot on those elements regarding the home field complex for Pierce College. During that time, we also made the decision as a city to move it from the original field, which was field 3, to put it at field 1. So that created some additional layout and changes to the design and how things would be put together. And we did do ILA update to address those items. So the ILA that you have tonight is really talking about how the total cost for what we anticipate the project to be. We've got good cost estimates, who's providing the resources for the project. And then before we actually get started on construction, Pierce College and the city said that we would do an additional ILA, which is the one we're talking about tonight, just to make sure that we are addressing things like shared use and maintenance and operations, future funding for improvements after the life cycle of a particular area, just so that, especially the college, they could make sure that the investment that they were being made was secured and that they were getting the benefits of that investment on those properties. Again, at the end of when the project's built, it will belong to the city. It'll be the city's fields on the city's land, but the college will have access to that facility throughout the process. So that's sort of the history. And so tonight, if you start, I think it's on page 26 of your packet, is really sort of the details of this ILA. And it really talks about, starting with on page 26, supervision and security. We both are making investments in this facility. We do a good job of managing the use of the facility. We want to make sure that that continues. Pierce College, of course, wants to make sure that the site that they're going to be investing in is going to be well maintained. So we have some information there regarding use and supervision. Some of the games may be after hours. The park's open, dawn to dusk. So there's just some information in here that says that if Pierce College would be in there after hours, we would identify that as a special use permit, because that's what we do for activities outside of regular hours, and that, they would be responsible for the site security, closing the gates, things like that. The reimbursement for utilities, we've laid this out here, that there'll be meters assigned to water and utilities for the site. And so the use during the period of time in which they were the primary user would be reimbursed by them. City would pay for those utilities and then just bill them for that use. We talked about fees and cost sharing. If we're collecting fees for activities and events, the city would keep it. If they're collecting fees for activities and events, they would keep that in line with this ILA. We do have a code in there. If they wanted to utilize the park or say banners or sponsorship or things like that, that would be generating revenue in a public facility. And so we would just, again, address that through a special use permit so that it was meeting our city's code, which you have listed in there under fees and sharing. We have the idea that we would take a look at this every 2 years. It's going to take a couple of years to kind of get a vibe going with, what they're using and how we might use it. And also, as it becomes more popular with the baseball, softball crowds, we'll take a look at it every 2 years and make sure that the designations that we have, the 75-25 or the permit, the utility use, et cetera, is in line with this ILA. And if we find that it needs to be adjusted, we'll work together on that and bring that forward to you for any changes as needed. Again, conflict resolution, there's a system in there so that if for some reason we couldn't have a conversation about it or we couldn't figure it out ourselves, we'll take it up the chain. And of course, we're going to be covered from liability as we are. We have risk management, we have liability release, so we'll both be covered there so that we're not putting the city at risk and the college isn't putting themselves at risk. And the agreement is for 30 years. I mean, there's quite an investment, and that's kind of the life cycle of a facility such as that. The first period of depreciation is about 10 years. And so there's some language in there. And if you look at the life cycle of a full turf field, it's typically 8 to 10 years. Usually it lasts about 10 years. So that lines up quite well with the product that we're installing. There is a chart in your packet. I believe it is on which page might this be on? It's the exhibit B, page 32. And we put a matrix together that will be part of this agreement. And again, we wanted to have it be an exhibit so that if we needed to update, we could update the exhibit without having to change the whole ILA. But if you take a look at it, it's laid out So that the full turf replacement, and we're talking about the home complex field right now, not all the other fields. This is all really related to the Pierce College home complex field. Is we taking a look at, initially Pierce College would be using it about 75% of the time. We'd have it 25% of the time. And so we'd assess that wear and tear over the periods of review, and that when and if it came to the period of time to be replaced, we'd be looking at Pierce College covering 75% of that cost and the city covering 25% of that cost. We have repair as needed. And again, we'll all be trained on how to do that based on, is it something that happened because of wear and tear for the Pierce College program, or was it something that happened during a tournament or during city use? You have some details here on high wear areas. And again, that's going to be based on the situation and which time of year and when something might be used. Things like the windscreen, the dugouts, those are really being created and for the Pierce College program. So basic wear and tear, they would be replacing or fixing those at 100%. Vandalism and graffiti, that's one of those things that you kind of have to wait till it happens. And was there a safety issue in which somebody didn't follow a rule and something happened? Was it just someone snuck into the park? Was it based on bad maintenance? We would take a look at those things, and then we would, whoever was really responsible would take care of that. But as we do, as soon as it's identified, we would assess it, fix it, close it down if something was a safety factor, just like we do in the park for everything. And then we're all going to be, we'll be working with Pierce College. They'll be on the fields. They'll be utilizing the fields. We'll all be trained on how to maintain them. We typically don't let our partners and nonprofits and little leagues, things like that, maintain our facilities because some of their good efforts can create quite a bit of damage, but this is a different situation. So we will be working with Pierce College. They'll be doing maintenance on their facility when they're in use. And they may even do some of the maintenance when they're not using it because they want to make sure that it's in the right space. So we'll be working through that with them as well. Oh yeah, just one extra thing is there was a code of conduct that was created. And that is really because, again, when we put this kind of investment in a facility, we want to make sure that it's managed properly. When we're using it or when the college is using it, we know we're going to take care of our things. We do that all the time. So this would be a code of conduct that would be in place for any other, for us as well, but any other group for tournaments, leagues, classes, special events, things like that. There's a code of conduct because it's really important to make sure people understand that there's special things you can and cannot do on these facilities, just again, to extend their life for the life of that investment. So that is kind of the ILA user group. We did provide an update on the actual cost, which has accelerated throughout the process of design. And again, it's not because we keep adding things or changing things, although we're refining things and designing things and doing current cost estimates. We're working with a really great firm that's helping us with those things. And Pierce College has been identified, and they're at the table throughout this process. And they've committed to providing the resources that it takes to make this happen for this project. The city's investment has not changed from the beginning of the project for the 3 fields that we'll be improving as part of this. So I think those are all the main parts of this ILA and the program in which we added things based on what we received from council feedback on the last ILA. And we'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Anderson had a question.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I just know that Cheney Stadium was built 60 years ago for under $1 million. It's $9 million in today's dollars. So the real cost of stadia has increased greatly. My questions regard appearance and advertising. Where does it say there's some control over the appearance so it doesn't look like Mattress Ranch?
Well, the city would have control and approval of any kind of advertising that would occur on there if it was.
No, I mean, just the appearance of the building itself. So it can't be red and green and purple
Oh,
polka dots.
I'm sorry.
That's the appearance part.
Okay.
Is there some
Yes,
agreement buried in
in
here?
the second ILA, we outlined the color schemes. There were some designs that were put together. We can provide that again for council. But when we did the second ILA, we had building style and we had cross sections and we also had color decisions at that meeting. So we got concurrence from council. And I think it was the May council, but we'll get that back to you so that you have that, just to remind you what we agreed to.
And you started on the second question, which was advertising.
Sure.
What is it?
There will
What is
be,
the joint policy on what could be advertised there?
right, well, the city has a sponsorship and advertising policy, so we would follow that.
Does
From
it say
a,
that though?
I beg your pardon?
Where does it say that we follow?
Oh, I believe
Follow our
it is
advertising
in
policy.
our,
Because you're talking about them being able to put banners up and get revenue. It's,
oh, so to follow, make sure that we're following the city's policy regarding advertising is what you're saying to add? You'd like to see that added?
yes, so that we're getting, if we're the owner and it's at the front and center of the entrance to our park, if, in theory, I trust their good judgment, but
Correct,
who knows?
right.
Sometimes I thought the legislature had good judgment.
We'll double check that, and make sure that it says that in there so that it's meeting what the city's code is or the city's policy is on that. So we'll check on that. And that the city would have approval for anywhere banners or advertising or things like that would be located. So I do believe that's something that has typically occurred, but we want to make sure that it's done properly and meeting the city's, whatever, we're moving forward with brand coding and design elements. So we'll do that. And make sure that that meets the city's code. I will add that they are planning to have a scoreboard that has Pierce College. I think we talked about that at the meeting in May, and we can provide that information for you as well. And it would, it's Fort Silicon Park, it'd say Pierce College, home of the Raiders. If there was any kind of naming or things like that, it would of course come to council for approval.
This is the ball field. It's gonna have some lighting, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
The main field will be lit. Mhm.
Mr. Branstad.
Yeah, thank you for moving this process forward with this ILA. I think the creation of the home field and being incorporated into a project to improve Fort Silicon Park addresses a number of items in our vision for 2026. Highlighting the excellence of our educational institutions as well as our parks and open spaces. So I'm glad to do that. I think the set of rules that are on like page 33, maybe that are designed to protect the surface. Okay, the way that they're worded here, because it's an attachment to the ILA, is that they apply to the home field. But are we anticipating that the Parks Board is going to consider substantially the same rules to be applied on the other three fields?
Yes, we'll want to make sure that we protect all of the turf surfaces.
Yeah, it would be good to not have slightly different rules for three fields than there is for the fourth one. And then on the chart on page 32, which had the about maintenance and such, there is a section there on vandalism by graffiti damage. And it says reviewed within 48 hours and addressed on a case-by-case basis, and it's 2 TBDs. And I think I understand why that is. It's hard to predict. In one piece of graffiti could be like this, the other could be a wall. But there's nothing in the chart that addresses vandalism other than graffiti, such as destruction of something, breaking, tearing down damaging the fence or something. And I just wonder whether that, we need to have an understanding about that, even though it may look very much like the graffiti that says we'll evaluate it and we'll do that. And, someone, a car could run into the fence, and you could have something like that, it's a little bit difficult to determine other than on a case by case basis how it is, but we ought to at least acknowledge that possibility exists.
Sure, I think if we even just change that to vandalism by graffiti or other damage, that would cover that, because that was the intent. And we probably looked at it 10 times and thought, oh, it was covering it, but that's a great comment. We can make that just more clear, because that is the intent. Vandalism is more than just graffiti. The one right below it talks about fencing, scoreboards, lighting, bleaching,
Yeah,
et cetera. So-
intentional or accidental damage.
Correct. And then we would determine the situation, we'd fix it and then figure out who's paying for it between both of us.
Yeah.
They may be down there, picking up a paintbrush and covering graffiti long before we even see it. So we'll be working together on that, make sure. Pierce College does a great job of keeping their HEC facility and those other facilities, in good shape. And I know that they're going to treat this field the same way.
Thank you.
Maybe one clarification on that might be helpful too, although it's putting a little more burden on the city, since the city is the owner. When the car that's insured runs into it, it should probably be the city that's designated as handling the claim or having the discretion to settle it.
Yeah, we work with risk management whenever there's a claim, and it would be the city's responsibility to take care of it and then figure out who's paying for it, whether it's insurance, non-insured, or whoever. So yes.
I think that should probably be in the agreement so that people down the line, when we aren't here, look at it, whose responsibility and whose right and responsibility it is.
Yeah. It does say that we're the primary fiscal agent, but we'll clarify if that has to deal with any accidents insurance. We'll see if there's better language that we could sneak in there for just to cover that, because that's our current practice, but you're right, it could be clarified in there. Well, there's an updated schedule on here, right here at the bottom of page 35. And it's in permitting now, so we've got those things started, and so there's estimated review times and construction times. So July of next year is probably when we'll be 2024. No.
July of this year, breaking ground.
Oh, yeah, July this year, but being completed next year. So
We had a conversation about Western State and the construction activities and the impact on the road. We talked about a new roundabout at the entrance.
yes,
So.
Well, we mentioned-
Going to happen at the same time.
it's all going to happen at the same time, and we're going to have a 40,000 person event happening at
Right.
the same time. So
Why not?
no, we've been working, we work really hard with the police department and with Public Works Engineering and all of the people that have great ideas, and we'll manage all of this confusion and chaos as best we can, just to make sure that it's safe for the city, safe for the individuals who are coming and going, safe for the facilities. That's what we do. So we'll do our best to work on that.
Hopefully won't have if the cart before the horse is the roundabouts in before field one is constructed or completed.
the
We don't
goal.
want it to be torn up.
No, that's the goal, is to do
Yeah.
things efficiently and in time. If you can see the timeline, we're starting Monday after Summerfest. So that's our goal. So
Got it.
the roundabout's supposed to be in March,
Okay,
April.
Patty, and then Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. This is very exciting. So will there be joint communication coming out from Pierce College and the city? And what would that look like?
I would say yes, that's a great idea. And what it might look like, I will have to talk to our communications people on that, but we'll make note of that to work together on that so that we're all sending the similar information out regarding the project, so we can get as much information to our community as possible. We're gonna have to be doing a lot of communication regarding not just, yay, this is a great project, but be careful, you might have to come in a side gate, or you're gonna park over here, and The dog park's closed on this day, not that we would do that, but there could be elements where we just need to continue to communicate with our community on that. So we'll do our best. We've got good people working on that. Yeah, in case anybody didn't hear that, what she said is Pierce College has web pages that they do when they do projects. We would do a web, either a link, or we would communicate so that they were similar on our own city webpage. That so yeah, we'll do that together and just make sure we get as much information and signage and temporary signage and best we can do. So
Yeah, I think that's, it's important to be able to let folks know what's going on, so what the end state is. And while some people are fans of websites and such things, I think that given that over the course of this, we're going to have a sequence of major events that take place in the park, of designing some sort of a charrette that's just a visual that people can just walk up to and look at, okay, to see what it's going to look like when it's done, okay, and maybe with something about the timelines that's going on, will reach a lot of people that will gravitate to that spontaneously, where they might not wander to a website after the fact.
sure, yeah, we'll use a number of methods, and things like the farmers market and our summer concerts and other kinds of special events where we can have displays out, have maybe a board at the entrance. We'll do lots of different things to get good information out to our people. Sure, and multi-use, so.
You can ask. Yeah. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. I think like virtually every commercial real estate project, whether it's a condominium project, a strip mall, a new store, it's pretty simple to put out a graphic depiction of, the architect's elevation on a sign that says coming July 2024.
Yeah.
Whatever you officially name it, the Pierce College Raiders home field grandstands or field improvements or whatever, and stick it out there, and everybody just drives by and says, well, what's the dirt getting moved over here for? There's a picture.
Yeah, that's great.
For information, call Ms. Dodsworth. For complaints, call Sylvia.
Oh, I was gonna put the mayor's number there.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Perfect.
And,
Yeah, we'll do
and the mayor wants, is it Anaheim? They have the waterfall.
Gotta be a water feature.
Oh, the water
somewhere.
feature?
Waterfall.
Maybe coming out on the big sign, the score with a water feature coming, a waterfall.
Something about leaking. Preferably.
Well, I can't guarantee that. Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just thought of this. The businesses along that area, do you communicate directly with them, or you just put up signs? How does that work?
It varies. We have at times mailed postcards about things. I mean, I would suspect it would make sense to do some kind of communication along that way besides just that. But depending on the activity, the event, the day, the time and the place and the impact, we have done a variety of communication things for the residents and the businesses in that area. So there's going to be a lot happening in that area. So I'm sure the city will work really hard to make sure between communications department, our economic development department, community development, and then our parks as well. We'll all work together and make sure we get that word out so that people know that they can take advantage of the opportunities that are happening there, or really try and stay away if it stresses them out. So
That'd be a good idea, because a lot of people excited, not the sidewalks going in, but I keep reminding them there's going to be some inconveniences, so be patient. So to meet with them personally or directly would be helpful.
I'm sure that the city manager will provide details for you all so that when you are meeting with your service clubs or neighborhood groups, or you'll have those details. He's usually pretty good about keeping you guys up on that. Give you
Great.
the right thing to say.
Yes, thank you.
the business in that area will really benefit from, $500,000, $500 million worth of construction in that area. There's gonna be a lot of sandwiches purchased, I think, so.
It's gonna be busy for sure. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. Do you have anything to add while we're here? Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, next, we are taking a turn here, bringing on the city attorney. Always a dangerous turn. We will be reviewing the proposed ordinance related to the protection and preservation of public spaces. Take it away, Ms. Walker.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the council. Heidi Wachter, City Attorney for the City of Lakewood. This has been brought before you once before, and as you've probably seen it in a variety of headlines and court cases, the ongoing consideration of how to harmonize the different interests going on here with some of the homeless population. And as you know, one of the concerns is whether or not there's bed space in a community, but also as we look at what some other cities are doing, there's the impact question of this community on our resources such as water and trees and other things. And so as you can see from the memo that was provided, there were two things that were changed from last time. One has to do with environmental protection, specifically of the watershed. And I will tell you, I saw this in both the Spokane ordinance as well as the City of Tacoma ordinance. And at first I thought, well, we don't actually have tribes fishing here in the city of Lakewood. And that shows you my level of not understanding how a watershed works, because what it has to do with is the water that we toxify here in Lakewood goes into the waters that are fished by the tribes. And so, nothing exists in a vacuum when it comes to the water supply. And in fact, especially with ongoing or sizable encampments, because there's no infrastructure there, there really is an impact on the water. And so I talked to our community development director and talked about, are there other areas where we've protected the waters? And what we've done in our draft here is we have not just sat down and listed all the places we think there's water in Lakewood. What we did was we took the specific waters that are mentioned in our critical areas ordinance and in our shoreline management plan and simply said, we protect those waters in those acts. We continue to protect those waters with our protection of public spaces ordinance. The second thing is the use of public property. And this goes a bit further than some of the other ordinances we've seen in that we are not just talking about specifically city property, we're talking about any public property. And so what this would mean is that to the degree that the camping is impacting those properties, and by camping, I mean the overnight leaving stuff, like erecting facilities, putting things in an obstructive way in an area, and that's defined in the ordinance. And that does seem to be one of the distinguishing characteristics. So for example, if you lay down on a sidewalk, that's not necessarily the same kind of problem as if you start to build things in the sidewalk that then cause people to have to go in another direction. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions. I think this is a tough issue to struggle with. Different cities have approached it differently.
Okay, so my first question, under the definition of protected waters on page 47.
Yes.
So the definition in this document says shoreline environments, capital S, capital E, protected under the adopted shoreline management program, critical areas, resource land regulations, blah, 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 blah.
Correct.
What that means to me is it's not exclusive to protected waters located on public property. That definition is not exclusive to public property.
Correct. And it would force an enforcement question. One of the things that's unique about the water piece is that we're not actually in that instance. And, this is the kind of stuff that makes people not love lawyers so much because it's one of those distinctions that people look at you and say, well, you're playing games. But the water doesn't magically become clean if it's made dirty on private property and then flows into public property. That's the problem with the water piece. If you're talking about trees, that's a little bit different. There's trees on public property, trees on private property. If you only impact your own tree, if a tree falls in the forest kind of a thing. But with water, you would definitely be seeking to protect your watershed with this ordinance. And it does get into questions of where is the source of the pollutant coming from.
Well, my, lawyerly extrapolate to the nth degree question is on page 48, for instance, just for fun.
Right.
So I'm looking at paragraph 1 there on page 48. So no person can cause harm to the protected waters in the city of Lakewood, not owned by the city of Lakewood.
Correct.
Right? So you can't do any of the following, including 1, build or erect a structure along the protected waters. I get that. Or drive a nail or any other object in any tree for the purpose of building a shelter or any structure, or for affixing an object to any tree or the natural vegetation. So my contorted example is, so I want to put up party lights in Holly Hedge, and I've got an eye bolt in a tree to which I attach the party lights. Technically, I can't do that on any tree with an object that's affixed to the tree within the protected waters, which include not just public, but private waters.
This would, if you're talking about the protected waters. And so if you wanted to loosen up that language, we could. This is directly out of Spokane's language. And part of the issue with Spokane is their protected waters are specifically along one of the rivers in the city. It is focused on a particular encampment. Tacoma's is more focused on the watershed question.
So I think we gotta look at stuff like that to make it a little, that's a little bit too encompassing, because then people are gonna, take things to the nth degree. I get what we're trying to do. And as a boy who came from Spokane, I can tell you that Spokane doesn't necessarily always get things right.
No, and I'm not at all suggesting that they are. I'm just letting you know that that's where that one came from. And I would tell you that the enforcement would have to be different in public versus private. And what I'm hearing you say is that we would want to proscribe that sufficiently in the legislation that somebody would know whether or not they can drive the nail in the given tree.
Right. I mean, little things like that, I get, or maybe just take that out altogether. I know what we're trying to do here, but I think we need to clarify that it's those kinds of proscriptions on activities within the public portions of lands that have protected waters, because as I think I talked to maybe the manager, if someone's doing naughty things on private property, the private property owner has the right to trespass the person doing the naughty things anyway.
Correct.
So we're really focused on protecting the public property, and this is a tool within which we can use to further enhance protection for the protected waters within the public property or the city property. Public property.
I will certainly look at that. I think the problem with water is if you choose to protect water, you're in a different situation than if you're choosing to just protect property.
I get
And
it.
so we've got to split that
Free
hair.
flowing, so to speak.
Yes, yeah. So,
Mr. Anderson and then Mr. Branstetter.
Perhaps that can be bifurcated so that water is treated different than the other portion, like trees. One thing that I contemplated with this that I haven't found, maybe it's through poor reading, but is a permission element with respect to public property. So that it's without the prior permission of the owner or something along that line. For example, the school district could let the Boy Scouts camp on the baseball field. Or if we do that, that's permitted. So it's the unpermitted, so that there'd be a presumption that absent some evidence of permission, that it was prohibited, but it could be the encampment that's once a year or whatever at Fort Silicon Park, some school event, whatever. They even do glamping at Chambers Bay, Yeah, so there are things like that we want to accept.
Yeah, I do agree with the mayor that the protected waters piece, with respect to private property owners, when I look at the list of 5 things that you may not do, the first 4 are things that it's very likely a property owner might do in his backyard that's within 200 feet of the of the water, to be able to go and do that. Everything from putting up a birdhouse to planting a garden. It's unlawful in this regard. I think that it's the 200-foot limit is even. We have to come up with a way to document that we're granting approval to ourselves for some of the things that we do in some of our parks.
Mhm.
For instance, if you look at the, in the park along Clover Peak, where we're going to be doing restoration and things, much of it is there. So, ensuring that there is a way to document that we've approved it becomes more of a piece to be able to go and do that. And I guess I'm just a bit dubious about the enforcement section. When we come up against that there is an available shelter space. I'm not sure that 35 miles is the right radius to tell a person, here's the address of a shelter that has a space for you, and it's it's in Puyallup. So I guess the 35 miles, something that in some of the case law was found to be acceptable.
I think I've mentioned this to the council before. I think that the 2 cases we have most recently on this, the one out of Idaho and the Grants Pass case, have been very specific. And what that means is that nothing else is resolved. And so essentially, in adopting an ordinance such as this, you could say 35 miles, you can say 5 miles, you can say whatever you like. One of the biggest questions is whether or not they're requiring cities to have their own shelter within their own city, even when we have neighboring jurisdictions. And so because the 2 cases that have come out so far are so specific, anything we do is ripe for a potential challenge. And the best I can tell you is that we want to try and be in good company when we're challenged. We don't want to be terribly unique. And so we could certainly look at the 35 miles and see if there's something a little closer that we could do. But there's definitely room for a court to go further than either of the 2 recent cases and to say that each city must have its own shelter. That is a definite possibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly even if some of those things are created, it sounds a lot like enforcing vagrancy in the 1930s. In most, given our shelter situation in the city, that it means that in almost all, in the vast majority of times, in cases, we won't really be able to take enforcement action until something else is done infrastructure-wise with the shelter piece. And so while this ordinance portrays a proactive stance to be able to do that, that in reality, it will, I don't see it in the near term or even in the midterm, it becoming very effective or becoming a useful tool, other than it will create expectations that we won't be meeting with the public. So I'm not sure that I'm, as it is written here, I'm not quite sure that I'm thinking it's a good idea to enact it. In the same way that enacting other laws that we can't enforce.
Well, I wholeheartedly disagree. We can sit back and let the failed policies of San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle envelop us, or we can take a stance. And 35 miles is a pretty good range. If we give somebody a ride and give them a free place to stay, we can send them back to where the legislators live that create the problem. They've created an attractive nuisance. People know there's stuff to get if you get into our region. And the vast majority of these people, I have to disagree with Mr. Branstetter here, vast majority of these people do not take the help. We have to offer the help, we have to make it available. And so it's help or the highway. There is absolutely, the legislature has created a situation where there's almost no coercive impact on the individuals to get them into treatment, to get them into a shelter, to get them into jail. So it's open drug use, a rise in crime, people dying outside who should be institutionalized. This at least is a measure to give us a tool which can be used with discretion to move people along and make our community safer.
I think it's a good first step to getting where we want to go. Obviously, we might have a few tweaks here and there as we refine it as best we can. But I'm curious, you know, the two cases you mentioned, Boise and Grants Pass,
Correct.
didn't necessarily bring in the uniqueness of the protected waters piece, right?
No, they did not. And I would tell you that I think that it's an effort on the part of cities to underscore the fact that this isn't about the anti-vagrancy. The message that they're trying to send is not so much about anti-vagrancy, it's more about protection.
Sure.
Given the realization of what not having infrastructure does when people either for a lengthy amount of time or in a volume of people camp in an area. And camp is,
Right.
you know, the current term for what's going on here, but there's not an infrastructure to support it. And so there's a growing recognition that the impact on the land is actually
sure.
quite serious.
Do we know, I've heard that Marysville is looking at a similar ordinance. You know,
The latest one I've heard about Marysville is actually the one that has to do with using drugs in public.
okay.
And we do have
That's right.
people working on that, and that will be coming before you in the
Separate
coming
deal.
weeks
Got it.
and months. Yes, at an appropriate time when they've had a chance to study it. We are definitely looking at all of those different artifacts, if you will, of what we've got going on out there right now.
Yeah, I did get a call from the mayor of Puyallup, and they are similarly looking at an ordinance like this. So there may be
Well, and one of the
some
things that-
value in chatting with Steve Kirkley, maybe.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
Joe Beck is their city attorney, and we have a good working relationship with their office. I do think when the Idaho case first came out, one of Puyallup's questions was, okay, well, if we are a neighboring community to places with shelters, are we as a city required to have a shelter? And that seems to be a common question. If you're a big city like a Tacoma, you already have shelters. But for every satellite city around a larger city to have their own shelter is expensive, among other things. And so that is a lingering question. I could certainly look at what other cities are doing. And one of the things I was reminded I did not get ahead of that I should have for you is coordinating with the CSRT group about how useful or not useful this tool would be to them. They appreciate the council's efforts to give them as many tools as possible, because sometimes you do need a whole toolbox to deal with what they're dealing with. But I am currently scheduled to meet with them. If you pass this, I'll meet with them. If you want me to come back later, I can meet with them. Either way, based on what you're telling me, I can come back with some changes. If you want me to do coordination between now and then, I can certainly do that too.
Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Walkley, we talked about the 35 miles and you said that was transportation. What type of transportation do we provide?
We would have to come up with how that would work. But for us to say 35 miles and not provide something makes the 35 miles exactly the way that Councilmember Brandstetter painted it. It's like, what are you going to do with that person? So you have to figure out a way to get them there. And I think particularly given where the cases are right now, that whole question of whether a city has to provide a shelter, I can tell you, if you want to make yourself a target, don't have a shelter in your city and don't give people a way to get to one. You will become the next target, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Well, thank you. I think it's a good step in the right direction. And I think we've got consensus to march forward with this.
And have some follow-up, or do you want me to come back with a fresh draft, or how do you want to do that? Do you want another study session?
Why don't you come back with a tweaked draft? How does that work? And then we can
To vote on or to consider?
do a study session.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will coordinate with the manager when the right time would be. I'm thinking, 11 o'clock at the end of a 5 or 6 item study session.
Right, perfect.
Kidding.
Yeah. We'll opt for anything at that point in time.
You will be happy to know that the next presenter is also from my department, but is not me.
Now, if Ms. Kraus has cookies that night, that might actually work just fine. So. Okay, next we have our city clerk who will give us an overview again, kind of a reminder on the process by which we went through the last council vacancy filling process, and you'll give us an update on the memo you provided. We'll chat a little bit about the questions and then solidify our process.
So Mayor, on page 51 of your packet is a memo outlining next steps in the city council position 6 vacancy selection process. Specifically, there are 6 options for special meeting dates for the city council to consider for interviewing of the candidates. And then there's an interview overview. This is similar to the process that was used in 2020 when recruiting for then Councilmember John Simpson's vacancy. It provides for 15 minutes per candidate. 2 minutes for an introductory statement, 5 interview questions totaling 2 minutes each, and then 2 minutes for a closing statement. Also provided is the selection process that was used, which employs selection rounds to narrow down to the successful candidate. So for purposes of this evening, if we could start with taking a look at the 6 date options that were provided for city council consideration for those candidate interviews. The city clerk would then reach out to candidates to get them scheduled.
Got it. So we have, I'm looking at the options there, the option, and it looks like you're trying to get dates close in proximity for each option, right?
Correct. Here we've provided Tuesday, Wednesday options. The council could also, select a Tuesday, Thursday if those dates would work.
And we're
better.
planning on how long for each of one of those dates? Like
They
an
would
hour,
be
hour and a
2
half?
hour time,
2 hour time
essentially
frame.
2 hour meetings, 15 minutes per candidate, 6 candidates each evening.
And there's nothing that says that we couldn't start a little earlier, right? Like at 6 p.m. if we wanted to.
Correct.
as I'm looking at the option dates, I was initially concerned that I could do option one because of a Wednesday flight time, but if we started at 6 on both Tuesday and Wednesday, the 14th and 15th, that would work. The challenge for some of us is that we still would like to stay married. So there is the Valentine's Day issue on the 14th. And okay, so maybe we then not worry about option one. Every day is Valentine's Day for the city manager, apparently. Yeah. Yeah, so that apparently he I won't even comment on that. Option 3, let's take a look at 3, because option 2 is one I'm not gonna be able to do. I'm simply not here.
And I'm really, now I don't know that I'll be here for option 3.
Oh, really? Okay.
And Mayor, I apologize for interrupting. Actually, option 3 does not work because Tuesday, the 21st would be a regular city council meeting given the holiday that month.
Got
So
it.
my apologize for that error.
So how about option 4 for most folks? It's open for me right now.
Yeah, that's another one for me. I think I'm gonna be gone then. I just don't know.
Oh, 22nd, 23rd.
I might be able to zoom in.
Which date? Yeah, you could certainly zoom in.
Yeah, I just don't know. I may be here.
Yeah.
But I'm
Got it.
I'm kind of,
So we're looking at these. Let's see, what about, which of those dates are problematic for you? Is it 21, 22, or 22, 23? Both, all?
I need to find out, but I'm guessing it's that week. It's that week of the 20th,
Okay,
but let me text here.
let's take a look at then the 28th and the 1st. What do you think about that option? The 28th and the 1st? Mr. Branstad, are you good with that? 5 potentially? Okay. I could do 1, but. Okay. So 5 looks so far to be okay. I mean, it extenuates out this process a lot, but I'm just trying to think. So we've got December, January, February, March. It doesn't give us a ton of time to do our deliberation if those are the 2 nights for the interviews. Which means we're gonna have to jump and make sure we get the deliberations done really the following week, because we've got, I think, till what, the 15th or the 20th or so of March.
Mayor, you have until March 28th to make a decision.
Got it. There was at the last meeting, yeah, because we only have, unlike the time ago, we are down to 12. And the thought was 10 minutes or so per person gets us to a block that's workable for most people. And there was a consensus because it was more of a community fairness approach, but
Option 1 and 2 work best for me right now. I don't know that option 3 and 4 look like I would just zoom in probably is what I'm thinking. I don't know about option 5.
you don't know as we sit here, huh? Can't leave it.
6, I'm not getting any.
And I could do option 1 if the manager takes my wife out for dinner. So I could make that happen. Perfect, there you go.
Option 1 is your problem.
I can do option 1. I mean, I can do it. Yeah, it's like, every other day.
See, we haven't done it for years because one of my kids' birthday is.
It's a Hallmark holiday, isn't it? I mean, that's really what it is.
Keep trying to do that.
Yeah.
day that you either give that thing sent out, next day you're supposed to give it to the person that gave it.
I have never heard of that tradition. Good for you. I'll tell my wife that she should be doing that for me.
It's actually a Japanese.
I like it.
All right.
Okay, so. I
You know
mean,
what, I'll zoom in depending on where I'm gonna be this day.
15, 16 is really bad for me. I'm completely,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So how about 5? Boki doesn't know, right? On 5?
Yeah.
How about 6? Okay. So 1, excuse me, option 6 rather, March 1 or 2. Arbitration.
Or option 6, you're saying?
I'd prefer 5 if we can do 5.
I think we told that. The people were all in person. He was just saying that he would.
I'm, I may have to at least, I don't know, if we do 5 and 6. It's close. It's really close.
I mean, I could do 6 if need be, if that helps you. 5 and 6, that whole week is a problem for you, huh?
No, I don't know that it will be.
Okay,
The 28th might be a problem.
well, if the 28th is problematic, why don't we look at 6? It's just the next day, right? And 1 and 2, is everyone pretty good on that?
Then when's your plan to vote then?
I can come back to option 1.
Yeah, that works for me too.
I mean, I can do it. I mean, I can make it happen.
Number
I can make
1,
option 1 happen. You can't though, right? Okay, yeah, and I could make the 15th work, but I'm flying out at 11 o'clock, so.
that night.
Mhm.
Okay, that might not work for you.
I mean, I could do it at 6. If we get it done by 8, I can get the airport by 9:30 or so.
That's
I'm fine with that.
That's tough. That's not gonna work
Yeah.
for you.
Okay. Should we try 5?
28th and the 1st.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Schumacher, option 5.
So Mayor, would that start at 7 PM,
Let's do 6.
6 PM?
Can you, and we'll have 6 PM.
Okay,
I was gonna
thank
say
you.
we'll have something to eat, but then. 6 p.m. Okay. You could probably zoom in though, if need be. Okay. Okay, 6 o'clock. Yeah, does that work?
Okay, I will send a meeting invite to each of you for Tuesday, February 28th, Wednesday, March 1st at 6 PM.
And then go ahead and stick it on the calendar real quickly so it's there for us. That'd be great.
Okay, we will do.
Both days, right?
Yep,
28th and 1st.
yep.
Got it.
Yep. Okay, so then the next, now that we got over the hurdle of the dates. Yeah, is to just review the interview process because we made the decision last time to do the interview of each candidate. So we've got roughly 15 minutes allocated, right, for each candidate? So that means you're gonna have 6. You have 15 down here, but we could, I thought we said 10 last time, 10 to 12. Is it full 15? You got,
With what is scripted here, it would be 15 minutes. They would be given 2 minutes for the introductory statement. You could narrow down to have less than 5 questions if you didn't want to do the full 15 minutes and then providing 2 minutes for the closing statement. I know there was discussion about increasing time for the closing statement. When I looked back at how it was done in 2020,
we did like 30 seconds.
Correct.
Yeah, so 2 minutes should be plenty. It's better than 30 seconds for sure. 2 minutes on the intro is plenty. Unless you guys disagree. The interview questions are okay. I think we should think about tweaking those a little bit.
Yeah, I still feel that going to 4 questions and eliminating question 3.
Yeah.
Gets us a rounded set of questions that they have to come at from some different angles and where like the answers would be meaningful or informative.
Yeah, I think question 3 is something we can certainly omit. Anything else you want to bring up in lieu of the other 4? It's on page 51 of the packet.
Yeah, I think 4 questions provides that time at the end for the person to make their original case.
I think that's good.
Okay. Any comments, questions, consternations? What would you like us to change them? You're good? Oh, good. Nice, nice. Why don't we just bring up Holly on Zoom and get this done?
I know, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it looks like we have consensus on option 5. We're going to do 15 minutes per each candidate with the interview outline as stated on page 51 minus the 3rd question about vision, because we'll glean that from the priorities we're going to discuss in question 4. And the why you, why now question is kind of always a good punchline that leads to their conclusion. Okay, any other questions, thoughts, or comments? Otherwise, we'll move on. Those items tentatively scheduled for next week's regular city council meeting are on your packet there. So we've got a proclamation acknowledging our chief for his contributions to the city of Lakewood, Police Chief Zarro. We've got our proclamation for February's Black History Month, Youth Council Report, Clover Park School District Report, and then some ancillary other issues. So now let's turn to Mr. Caulfield for his weekly report. You're on. If you're still planning the Valentine's Day for us. Right, exactly.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. Just a few updates this evening. Wanted to let you know we received a request again this year for the council to consider recognizing the month of March as American Red Cross Month. And unless there's any objection, we can bring that back to you as part of your March 6th regular meeting. You did do it last year, and you had done it in previous years on and off as well. So. At your next regular meeting under reports by the city manager, our deputy city manager, Todd Kraus, will be providing you an update on the 3rd quarter financial report. And by the way, that was supposed to come forward to you in the earlier January timeframe, but we had some other things that we're working on. But and so we're actually now working on the 4th quarter financial report and closing out the year. So the 4th quarter report's going to come back to you in about another month or so. But through 3rd quarter, I just wanted to let you know that we are tracking as it relates to just about all of our financial metrics and such. Matter of fact, our operating revenues compared to both budget and compared to 2021 year to date are, exceeding expectations. There are a couple of areas that we do have some concerns, particularly in the area of sales tax. Sales tax is flat compared to collections in 2022 compared to collections in 2021. And it's just slowing down. And that's driven by a slowdown in retail trade, which represents about 46% of our total sales tax take, which is pretty significant. And then construction, which represents about 16%. On the construction side, that's not a surprise because also private investment has slowed down as compared to activity going back to 2018. However, construction investment compared to the previous 20 years or so is actually still way above those averages. But things are slowing down, and it's not in just one area, it's across the board, and both housing, I'm sorry, both in residential / housing as well as commercial. But again, historically compared, it's doing much better. And quite frankly, this is just all driven by the slowing of the economy. But as we look toward the end of 2022, I expect our finances to have met all of our financial metrics, and we'll be in very, very solid position as we close out the year. The concern is as we look into 23 and 24, as it relates to particularly sales tax, development services, and some other key revenue sources. The good news is that we have very sound financial policies, and our financial projections are projected in a manner so that we don't get ourselves in trouble. So we should be okay. And we, as we've done in the past, we'll just keep a close eye on things. So I just wanted to just give you kind of a warning order that that's kind of where we are. But I don't have any concerns at this point in time. It's something that we've been seeing and we've been planning for. So, it's not something I'm losing sleep over. We'll just say that. I wanted to let you know that WashDOT reached out to us and invited the city to participate in a corridor study that they're doing on SR 512 from all the way down in Puyallup, all the way up to where it intersects with I-5. And so our Assistant City Manager for Community and Economic Development, Dave Buer, has volunteered himself to participate in that. It's about 5 or 6 meetings that began, I think, last month or maybe earlier this month. And they're also, they being WashDOT is also going to be undertaking a community engagement process. Basically this is the kickoff for WashDOT's initiative to look at improvements in that corridor, which right now there's no plan of when those are going to occur. I mean, it could be 20, 30 years before they get addressed. But the fact that they invited us to the table, we want to be at the table. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Have we heard anything from WashDOT or the Oklahoma Country and Golf Course about finalized negotiations on the interconnector road or path?
We haven't directly. I just know that WashDOT, they continue their process with the private property owner.
Okay.
Also, we have learned that, the governor pushed out because of some cash flow issues, has pushed out a number of transportation projects dating back that were approved back in 2015. And that's not one of them. So that's still on schedule to be hopefully constructed beginning next year. That's the latest that we have.
Great.
Wanted to let you know that we're moving forward on the DEI strategy the council had directed as part of their goals for 23, actually from 22 through 24, to develop a DEI strategic plan. And so we have been working on identifying an independent contractor to help us facilitate that. We believe we have identified one, and we're doing some more due diligence there. And we expect to bring back a contract for council review and consideration in the next month or so. So just wanted to give you a heads up. Also, we do expect it to be a very deliberate process. So meaning it's not something that is going to be completed in, say, 6 months, but rather more of a 12 to 18 month or even longer process. Also, unless the mayor and the council have any objection, we are incorporating there that you folks be key participants in that as well. So that your voices as the governing body are heard as that strategic plan is pulled together. On the legislative front, there's a number of bills that are being dropped. Ultimately, it's expected that over 3,000 bills will be dropped between now and February 17th, which is the first cutoff. So, we have been monitoring them. One of the areas that we have been playing a more active role is in the area of housing. Last week, there was a bill, middle housing bill, House Bill 1110, which for a number of reasons cities oppose, including preempting of local authority and just a plethora of reasons. The sponsor of the bill, she was kind enough to work with AWC to hold a listening session on Friday. And so the city of Lakewood was represented at the table. Actually, there was a number of cities that were there, which for cities anyways was very, very positive. Our concerns and our issues were addressed by a number of cities. However, we had 2 unique ones that we brought to the table that were not brought up. One is the fact that we have air corridor zones as it relates to housing. And, we have issues with, the federal government as well as with several agencies. And then the second, just, being a newly incorporated city, when you talk about building housing and things along those lines, we don't operate or own our own utilities, whether it's water, sewer, power, and the list goes on. And so that we don't have any control over that. So that's something that we want to bring to the forefront as these bills move forward. We did not have an opportunity to communicate that when they had the public hearing last week, because that was a bill that was essentially fast-tracked. And so cities, quite frankly, we were on our heels. However, its companion bill on the Senate side, 5190, is going to have a public hearing on Wednesday. And so the city, we're going to have a representative there to speak specifically on those two issues. And I know a number of other cities are going to cover other issues which are also important to us. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Along those lines, we had been scheduled to go down to Olympia to meet with our delegation on February 1st. However, several of our legislators, February 1st doesn't work because of just their committee assignments and such, unfortunately. So I know I reached out to the mayor and the deputy mayor today. And so we're looking at first and foremost doing it on February 2nd, beginning in the afternoon. And then if we need to, we'll follow up the following week on Thursday, the 9th in the morning. So just we'll keep you appraised of when they're all calendared. That's correct.
It changes.
Also, as it relates to housing, cities, we take, we take our role as, doing what's in the best interest of our community very, very seriously. And, the state legislature's approach, which is, well, all cities are the same, so it should all be the same. That's one perspective. But the fact of the matter is, while all cities are the same, all cities are also very, very different. One of the things that we have been contemplating, and depending upon where these bills go, or maybe where these bills don't go, we've been thinking internally about what you can do to protect and preserve your community and what's important to Lakewood. And some of the ideas that we might be bringing back to you, or you might want to consider either this year or maybe next year as part of the comp plan amendment update, is to require full offsite improvements for new residential development as it relates to increased density. Also implement design review for all single family residential development. That's not something that those are two items we don't have right now. And what I mean is like an individual, one parcel. Right now somebody can come in and they can build one or two homes on one parcel, and there's no frontage improvements, there's no design review. And and cities do that because they want to promote housing. But if you're going to preempt our local control, well, we got options as well that we can do under home rule. And then the third is, and this is a new one, is to require the removal of all non-conforming uses and structures from a property. So, here in Lakewood, that's something that we have quite a bit to deal with, particularly being a newly incorporated city of only 27 years, given that the county, their zoning did not overlap parcel for parcel when we incorporated. So those are just some of the things that we're thinking about. So on one hand, we're playing defense. On the other hand, we're looking out at the next year or so from an offensive standpoint as well. And I also just want to say on the public safety side, there have been some bills that have been introduced, bipartisan oriented bills as it relates to pursuit policies and pursuit issues. And really reintroducing reasonable suspicion to be used. And I just want to say that can't happen too soon. Just in the last few days, we have once again had just a number of people, officers pull up behind a stolen car and it just goes, they can't stop it. I know Councilmember Anderson and I were talking earlier today. There was a situation last week where a landscaper had his rig and his beautiful trailer parked out in front of a customer, and somebody came by and stole the vehicle, jump started the vehicle, stole the vehicle. Officers got behind the vehicle and could not pursue, and off they went. They just drove away. We can't pursue them. A couple of nights ago, there was a residential burglary in process, and officers showed up. I think a neighbor called, And so they saw that, and by the way, I don't know if they actually got into the house, but or what they got away with, but the two vehicles were seen driving right out of the driveway and officers could not pursue because reasonable suspicion is not allowed. And so it really is, it's getting out of hand. And that's happening more and more and more. So that is something that we will be talking with our state legislators when we go down there. So just wanted to point that out. And I think what you'll see in our our year-end police department report that Chief Zara will be bringing toward you to next month is that in the area of property crimes, vehicle theft and burglaries and things like that, those increases we can tie directly to these new police reform bills that were passed a couple of years ago. There is a distinct correlation there. And then just lastly, on a calendaring basis, this Friday, there's a couple of events going on that I know council's involved in. There's a housing forum, affordable housing forum, that both, I think members of council as well as their staff are going to be participating in. And then also the Chief Leschi Memorial Walk will be occurring as well. And so we're working with them to try and finalize the itinerary and the specifics on that. If you're interested, on Thursday and Friday, there's the point in time count that Pierce County once again is facilitating. And then again, I mentioned February 2nd meeting with our state legislators. So with that, that's my report.
Any questions, Mr. Caulfield? Who's going to the housing forum on Friday?
I know Councilmember Brandstetter is
Thursday. Okay.
Thursday. I'm sorry. I thought it was Friday morning. Well, whatever day it is.
Got it. Great. Just want to make sure we had somebody there. Leschi walks
No,
on
they're Friday. They're both on,
Friday.
yeah, they're both on Friday. Yeah, they're both on Friday.
Yeah, the Overcoming Barriers to Developing Affordable Housing is 8 to 1 on Friday.
And Tiffany Spears is one of the panelists.
And then the Honor Walk is at 10:30. Starts at 10:30.
Starts at 10:30. There'll probably be some words, and then the walk itself will probably begin around 11 a.m.
Right. It's going to be fun. Okay. It's going to be a good event. I just have a coordinator at 9, so I need to get out of there by 10 so I can get there by 10:30. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Caulfield? Great. If not, we'll go to, thank you. We'll go to council comments. Councilmember Bell. We'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thought that was really good discussion on some really important things tonight. It's good to get more information on Western State and to hear what's happening there. And also on the ordinance that's being proposed. I am looking forward to a little bit more information and conversation on that at the next study session. I think there's some good points in there and some other things I would like to know a little bit more about. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about Councilmember Boki? Very good. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Later this week, I'm planning to attend the dedication of the student mural from the Tilcom Elementary School at the Tilcom American Lake Gardens Community Service Center. That's it.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Anderson.
So I was particularly disturbed this week to hear that a rogue county judge had developed the belief that he could order the city not to make statements when the city is not a party to an action, is actually a victim, has a warped understanding of his jurisdiction and the separation of powers. 45 years ago, I was getting ready to graduate from law school and recognized that there were problems with the judiciary making law, and there were problems with the system finding truth. But I had the naive hope that that would improve over time, and I have only seen it get incrementally worse. to put this in context, and I feel free to make these statements because I'm a public official in public debate, and try to squash my free speech. In the Darcus Allen case, he was fairly convicted. That's my opinion. It's the opinion of appellate court judges. It's the opinion of the jury. The reason purported reason his conviction was overturned was that a prosecutor referred on more than one occasion to needing to know or should have known instead of just known as a standard in his argument. However, the jury was given the instruction that lawyers' statements are not evidence and that they must disregard any remark or statement or argument that is not supported by the evidence or the law as per the judge's instructions. So they were told that's argument. That happens in every case. So the appellate court has to be conceited enough to believe that all the jurors are stupid and they won't follow the instructions to find overturn it. Well, the jury at the end of the case also sent out a question, and they asked, now, in order to be an accomplice, do you have to know or should have known? Both counsel in that first case agreed with the judge's decision to refer them back to the jury instruction, which said known. The Court of Appeals upheld the conviction. The 9 judges of the state Supreme Court, almost all of whom were appointed by Governor Inslee, and who I think have a social agenda that is not to protect the public, stretched the law to find that they had to ignore the duplicative instructions of the court when they're told to follow that on a test that they specifically asked for. Now he's back in court. I saw part of his testimony. He's got a lot of practice over the years as a criminal lying. He's, in my opinion, obviously lying on the stand. And he has great motive to. But for a judge to say that somebody outside of the court can't say something, you can tell the jurors not to read the paper, don't talk to anybody about it, don't consider anything that's out of court. If you have a smaller town, everybody's going to know what the case is. So I think it's absolutely ludicrous. There's an old joke that, what's the difference between God and a federal judge? God doesn't think he's a federal judge. And it's trickling down to the lowest courts. And it seems like the lower it goes, the worse it gets. At least federal judges have the confidence in their position that they don't think that their pants are a lot bigger than they should be. So I'm disheartened. I have been for years, and it's only got worse. And this is an extreme example of judicial overreach. I'm glad the city is making some effort in court to have that stricken from what I would consider an extraneous, extrajudicial order stricken from the record. Because I think Chief Judge Zarro's statement was correct. And even if it's incorrect, I don't think there's any basis for the court to tell a non-party city what to do. So that's my rant. Try to shut me up.
Deputy Mayor Moss.
I have to say that I was shocked at the results of that trial, so I understood. The Western State update tonight was interesting. so complicated. So
Mhm.
many doors to go through and try to navigate through everybody's decision and request. So hats off to our staff. Thank you for what you do. I will do the walk in the, I plan to do the walk in the park Saturday. If it's not raining, Brown should.
Which walk now?
Walk, the Lush,
That's Friday.
I mean Friday, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna get you on the right day, yeah.
I know, thank you. And for my colleagues and the staff, the Multicultural Coalition LMCC event is up and running. We have a flyer out. In this QR code, I'm learning new words through this technology, is working. So please join me, help me to make this to be a great event. It is.
Remind them of the date.
It is March 3rd at the McGavick Center from 6 to 10 p.m.
Okay,
And Joyce Taylor is going to be IMC.
great.
And Michael Powers and Josephine Howell are going to entertain
Very
the
good.
music.
That'll
So
be great.
I'll get the flyer out to you guys, but I wanted to put it on your calendar so you, March 3rd. You can't zoom in.
Are you taking a month off or something from work? Yeah, okay, great.
Finally, I did attend the opera on Sunday. Janae was absolutely breathtaking. It was amazing. I love opera, so it was great. And then if we ever need a publicity person, let's call Pam Bridges, her mother. Anyone that had touched her, Janae, in any way at the reception, the MC called it out. Anybody, and from Lakewood, University Place, Puyallup, Tacoma, everybody was saying everybody's from either Lakewood, University Place, or it was really well attended from this area. She was very appreciative, but her mother made sure that anyone that had connected with her at all was recognized at the reception. It was very good, very good. The mayor and I, Mr. Mayor and I did attend the.
She stayed for more of it than I did.
Yeah, I did. I stayed in, and they didn't know they were going to do that, but they introduced anyone that was there. And if you wasn't there, we explained why. So it was great. It was absolutely wonderful. And they're begging her to come back. So she'll be back again soon. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're very welcome. Yeah, she's a fabulous talent. For sure, yeah. Beautiful lady. Well, that was a great event yesterday. I got to attend a bit with Deputy Mayor Moss up in Seattle, so it was fun. I lasted for at least the first half of it. It was quite good, though. I did. I met with a representative of United Way for lunch this last week, and they discussed United Way's effort as kind of the navigator for a variety of social services using a 211 app. And I have to say, I wasn't familiar with it. And so I invited them to contact our staff to maybe do a brief presentation at a future date so we could get a sense of what they're doing with the 211 app and to see how the resources are coordinated. And that might be of some interest. So you might get a call or they may reach out down the road. So it'll probably be included in that then. Yeah. Well, it has, but we don't hear a lot about it in terms of, I was getting the impression that, oh, it's a fantastic tool and people are getting connected for all these resources through that. And I thought, really? Well, I haven't heard that. So, and maybe it is, but I just thought it might be helpful to get an update on how Lakewood is accessing resources, if any. Great. Okay. Well, that'll be kind of helpful. I attended a meeting with the CEO of Pierce Transit to discuss kind of the current bus rapid transit project that is loosely in coordination with the city of Tacoma through the corridor. Needless to say, there are some financial challenges that remain as a result of the city of Tacoma's steadfast requirements for certain franchise agreements in the right of way and other sort of requirements for ADA improvements. So more to follow. I'll keep you in the loop. But there may be some options coming before the Pierce Transit Board that might scale it down or do something different.
My suggestion a long time ago was just start at Walmart in Spanaway and work back toward the city. It's the cheaper part to build and just dead end it at the city. And they don't get it unless they come around.
It's gonna be a challenge to get through a portion of the city. There are a couple intersections you're probably familiar with at 56 and elsewhere that are still problematic. So the price tag for BRT continues to potentially escalate. 200, 250, keep going, pick a number, and it may or may not be affordable at the end of the day. 170-ish million. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, easy, all meal deal. Yeah. All sorts of stuff. Yeah, very interesting. You could give everybody an Uber pass for life and you'd probably be better off. Yeah. And quit, right. Honor Walk on Friday, I will be attending that. I'm asked to say a few words at 10:30-ish or 11 o'clock for the start. If you have a chance to attend, it should be a good event. The Silicon Kiwanis had their Wine Fest on Friday. We are doing something similar with a city day for Lakewood Rotary on March 24th. So if you want to support a good organization, Kiwanis, Friday night is a great opportunity to do so. And if you miss that opportunity, we welcome you for the Lakewood one in March. So that is all I have for this week. We have no need for an executive session. So at this point, we're adjourned. Thank you.